Hi folks, my name is Girish, Bali, the host for Back to Basics, another Back to Basics for another week. Today, we are going to be talking to you about mentoring, life. Life is too short, isn't it? And I think it's too short is because we don't appreciate life. So we have this guest today, and his name is Troy. I think I've met him on one of the websites, I'm not really sure, and then we connected. We connected maybe a couple of weeks. And I'm telling you, we're like friends now. We're chit-chatting, we're understanding each other, and we're just becoming great friends now, even offline. So, Troy, how are you? And thanks for coming on Back to Basics.
I'm very well, and thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you again. So, before we get into the basics of life is too short, and the mentoring, and the mindfulness, and everything else we're going to talk about, what does Back to Basic mean to you?
Me, Back to Basics is about returning to nature, aligning with nature, with the cycles, the rhythms of nature, and that means our true nature and what we perceive as nature outside of us, etc.
Yeah.
I would add too that to the degree that we do return to it, the degree that we align with it, we are in harmony, we are in flow, there is a much higher possibility, if not probability, that we are going to thrive. To the degree that we live outside of nature, disconnected, again, our own nature, the rest of the natural world, etc., we suffer.
Yeah, thank you so much. It seems like I ask the same question to almost every guest of mine, and it looks like every answer is very different from everybody. So thank you again for your input and your insight on that. So thank you again for that. So
You're very
Troy,
welcome.
so you call yourself a mindfulness mentor, but the mindfulness comes in different angles. It comes with life, business, and health. Can you elaborate and discuss individual in three different parts as to how different is it, or is it kind of the same thing?
It's kind of the same thing. Mindfulness mentoring is one aspect of what I do, and it overlaps with everything else, but it's also sort of distinctive. And then these labels, as far as applying mindfulness in our lives, they start to dissolve. They start to fall away as I start engaging with someone, and we reach a certain level of connection, perhaps some kind of state of absorption. Because mindfulness, as I define it, it's certainly not the only definition, but it's a working definition that might serve some of your viewers. It's moment to moment, non-judgmental awareness of all of our internal dynamics and all that we perceive outside of us. So of course that has broad application. We can bring that into any and all aspects of our lives, and it's a richer, fuller, more peaceful experience of life if we do so.
Sure. Yeah, thank you again for that. So let me ask you this, and this question has come up several times on my Back to Basic Clubhouse that I've also had, and there was a title in there that I created called "Is self-love a selfish thing, or is it needed?" So what do I mean by that? What do I mean? So do I take care of myself too much that I don't care about others? Or is it okay to love yourself and care for yourself?
The latter. If you are attending to yourself too much, as you say, whatever that means, that's not love. Then you're getting into some kind of obsession, you're ruminating, there's narcissism. I mean, those are extreme examples.
Yes.
But self-care, self-love, it's the way you express your heart energy in part to yourself, how you honor what you are as part of the whole. And that is essential in part because that will determine the quality of how you can give your love to others, how you can take care of others. In other words, if we're not really taking care of ourselves, we can't really take care of others. We can to a degree, to a certain extent, on some levels, but if we're not giving that to ourselves, there's no way we can really be fully present and in service to anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you take that same scenario into the business world, you are doing whatever you're supposed to do as a project person. Okay. Now, if I'm trying to help out Troy or I don't help out Troy, does that mean that I'm selfish because I don't want to share knowledge with you? What are your thoughts on that part?
It doesn't necessarily mean you're selfish. I mean, there is something to be said for holding back, for being discerning, all of this. I can't speak to this generally because there's always exceptions.
Right.
But in general, having an orientation in the workplace of wanting to serve the greater good, wanting to take care of everyone, wanting everyone to succeed and thrive, looking for the most kind of the greatest strengths, as it were, in someone else, recognizing those, speaking to that person, and also in a kind, supportive way, bringing forth the things that they could stand to look at and work on more. That's a recipe for success in the modern business world, increasingly so.
Yeah, yeah. Now, if you take that same scenario for health, as you noticed, I'm doing in 3 different divisions from your life and business. Okay, so from your health point of view, a person who has cholesterol issues, blood pressure issues, who wants to take care of himself and taking everyday walks and all that stuff, and fully obsessed with taking care of himself and not think for others. Is that selfish or is that self-caring? What are your thoughts on that?
Again, I think it depends on the specifics of the scenario. Let's just say that person has realized that they have engaged in a certain amount of self-neglect, and that they haven't been available for others as a result, and maybe they're disconnected, etc. Then perhaps a period of intensive focus on one's well-being is in order. In other words, it's the classic adage that sometimes we have to be selfish to be selfless.
That's right.
So there's a time and a place to focus more on ourselves, and there's a time and a place to focus more outwardly, and that is all part of the inherent balance of life and part of honoring the natural flow, the natural order of things.
But I guess there's a thin line. I guess there's no book regarding a thin line. But when is the thin line that you just cross or don't cross?
Again, I think it takes mindfulness, and that is moment to moment awareness, and not blocking what you perceive with judgment.
Yeah.
At least parking that judgment until it actually serves, and just recognizing is what I'm doing now in harmony. Is this the best thing, all things considered? And it ultimately gets to a kind of intuitive state. Ideally, you're kind of surfing through life largely based on intuition and only engaging things like your rational mind, etc., when it serves. And that then becomes at least one way that we are guided or receive guidance through intuition.
Yeah. Thank you again for that, Troy, for making us understand between the life, business, and mental health that there are 3 different aspects of it, but it could be the same answer too at the same time. So, and people need to understand that too. So yeah, thank you again for that, Troy. So
you're welcome.
So the website, or I should say the company that you have is WWC. That's what I'm calling it. Okay,
yes.
So Wisdom Warrior Coaching. Can you explain as to what type of questions do you get and what type of troubles do you get? Let's say the top 3, so then you can guide me in that way. Go ahead.
Sure. Let me just add a little bit to what you just said to kind of wrap things up, at least in my own head.
Sure.
It's all life. It's all life. And there's yet another old adage that I really like, is that the way we do anything is the way we do everything.
Yeah.
So there are certain states of being that we can cultivate, or more accurately access, and then in doing so we can bring that to our entire arena, all of the spheres of influence that we inhabit.
Yeah. Thank you again for that. So now regarding the website and the foundation, what are the top 3 issues do you get from people?
Yes, great question, and one I hadn't really considered before. So hopefully they'll come forth as I describe them. Often I will find, it's certainly in like a life coaching context, I will find that people are feel either misguided or at a crossroads, and they recognize that in order to move forward with their life, they need greater focus on something. They need to connect with what it is that really inspires them. So that's one thing. Often, as far as obstacles are concerned, family dynamics are huge. People have issues with their families or their sort of intimate others, and these are often complexities. They serve as blocks for people. And then in a corporate context, yes, they're probably a bit easier to identify. Work-life balance is a huge one, but also managing their relationships with their colleagues is another really, really prominent one. And speaking of, being in alignment with nature and such, I mean, the corporate world in general, with the exception of a few very progressive elements, say startups, tech in Silicon Valley or something, are often based on a lifestyle that is out of alignment. So you have people with enormous amounts of demands on them, not enough balance built into the equation for themselves, and most of them are doing remarkably well at managing it, but still you are trying to align with nature within an unnatural environment, and that's an enormous challenge that I think underlies most people's issues in that context.
Yeah. Most of the pharmaceutical companies that I've heard in the last maybe couple of years now, it's even pre-COVID. What I have noticed, they take half days on Fridays during the summer. So they work till 12, 1 o'clock, and then they're done for the summer. The other aspect that I've actually seen also is that they take 1 week in last week of December, because that's the holiday time. Because they feel, and they still get paid. So it's more of what is it, rebooting or something like that, to get a new perspective after all day's work, and I think coming back and with a refreshed mind. I think that's the thought process that the pharmaceuticals are doing. I don't know about the 500 companies, the Silicon Valley companies, but the pharmaceuticals I can definitely vouch for, because I have seen they are doing that for employees, and they have actually put that on the health book as that's what they're going to be doing. So it's a very different lifestyle that we're coming up with, and I think it's kind of needed too. Don't you think?
I do. That's wonderful news, and I do see the progression towards that, the movement towards that. Some companies are a little more on the dinosaur side of things,
That's
and
right.
will either die out or they'll evolve and morph accordingly. But the way we've been doing things, not only in the corporate world, but the world as a whole, as most of us will agree, are unsustainable. So we're going to have to make fairly radical shifts in fairly short order if we're going to survive, one, and two, thrive. And thus there's a lot of rapid change that's afoot, and that's obviously where things like the coaching professions really come in handy to facilitate that for any given individual, group, organization.
Yeah, thank you again, Troy, for that. I was reading your website, and one of the lines, or one of the words, they were saying, "See the dark." Can you explain that a little? What does that mean? Because when I see the dark, I think of Halloween and darkness. So
well, 'tis the season.
It is the season, yeah. So tell me.
Yeah, I think that's from my bio, and I was kind of riffing on what apparently was my first complete phrase in life, according to my mother, which was "see the light." And I was actually just sort of standing, and I pointed up towards a light bulb, and I said, "See the light." And that was my first phrase or question or whatever it was. And that looking back, that was very symbolic. It's very indicative of what has been my life path, looking for it in various ways and helping others to see it, wanting others to see it. And as part of that journey, it's not all fluffy bunny rabbits, as the English say.
That's right.
As part of that journey, I had to really explore my darkness and the darkness in the world. And I'm not saying there's absolute evil or anything like that, but more accurately, my shadow side, and to acknowledge it and to bring it forward. And as someone who likes to focus on the light, and as is the case with most people who lean in that direction, we tend to stuff the darkness away as soon as it's not in our face.
Of course.
As soon as we don't actually have, we somehow the sun gets blocked for a moment.
That's right.
But in doing that work and looking at our shadow sides and looking at the ways that we're disconnected, etc., we free ourselves up to the degree we're willing to be with it and work with it and tease it apart and let it go. We free up space so that more of that light can shine in, and there's less and less of that dark to see, to look at.
So it's like saying, isn't it like a Zen thing, that it's a yin and a yang, good and bad, light and dark? There's always something. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's evil. There's always good and bad and right and left. Does that make sense? So
absolutely it does.
So is that the thought process that you came up with on your bio regarding the see the light and see the dark?
Well, that was my own kind of particular take on it. But yes, it does fit in with, speaking of cycles and rhythms in nature, they've been identified by many cultures throughout history. It does fit in with that. The yin and yang examples are particularly good because the symbol is really profound. Both are contained in the whole, for one, the yin and the yang,
yeah.
the white and the light and the dark.
Yeah.
And then there's a dollop of each in the other.
That's right.
Meaning there is no absolute. And yes, to answer your question simply, yes. That's exactly it.
Yeah. Thank you again. So let me step back a little. How did you start this whole thing? Or did you just wake up saying, I'm going to be a mentor?
Certainly not. That would be an enormously arrogant thought to start dwelling on and building on.
That's right.
It happened very slowly, and it's been an enormously humbling process to get to the position, to arrive at the position where people perceive me as such, and that I'm able to serve well in that capacity. I know that for a lot of people, it seems like everyone and their uncle is a coach these days, and it's still very much a Wild West industry, and that more or less anyone can hang a shingle, as it were, and call themselves a coach or a mentor or anything else. Again, if I haven't said it already, it's unregulated. Mm-hmm. For me, I never had that aspiration at all, and certainly not based on anything I saw around me. But I did have a really special, almost magical relationship with a man who has been an executive coach at a very high level for almost 40 years. And about 20 years ago, I was at a Buddhist meditation retreat at a monastery. And this man, he was an American man, and this was abroad, but he had been a monk there as part of his very interesting past. And I just found him so compelling, riveting even, just radiant, charismatic, wise, playful, funny. And I was just very taken with this guy and curious, like, wow, what source is he plugged into, as it were. Mm-hmm. And that began a long period of time, over quite a number of years, off and on, where he essentially served as a mentor to me. Mm-hmm. And again, it wasn't all rainbows and unicorns. He was very honest with me, and he would call me on my stuff. I remember one occasion where I was sort of brave enough to ask him if he thought I could ever do anything similar to what he did. And he said, no, not yet. Mm-hmm. You haven't felt your suffering enough. You haven't really gone there and felt it. I'm not saying that you haven't suffered. I'm just saying you haven't experienced it. You haven't allowed yourself to experience it. And as a result, you're carrying around way too much ego to defend against it. And, it was like, to my ego, certainly it was an affront. It was shocking. It was hurtful. But I recognized, even in that, the truth of what he said. So I took that bone and I gnawed on it and licked it and broke it apart over quite a few years, checking back with him periodically. And finally, there was a point when we met and he just paused and he looked at me and he said, you're ready now. And that conversely was a really wonderful experience. But of course, at that point, my ego didn't need the validation because I already was aware of it.
Yeah.
The enough humility was there to recognize the truth of it.
Yeah. So it seems like you found a purpose. You found that the mind is not in the vessel. The mind is away from the vessel. I think that's where you found your answer. Is that correct?
You could put it that way, yes. And I realized that I was providing quite a bit of backstory, and I didn't necessarily get to your question. So at that point, several years ago, 7-8 years ago, or something. Now, keep in mind, I had been working as a yoga teacher trainer, and I had been in service in various capacities, and indirectly serving as a coach and mentor, but not sort of officially, as it were. But at that point, I was able to connect with the organization that had formed around this mentor that I mentioned, and start refining my skills and building them and exploring it. And at first, it was like, I don't know if I can do this. But the more I did it, the more rewarding it was, the more enjoyable it was. And I would say that the more skilled I've become.
So I think it's more of experiences which kind of helped you in a way, and listening to other different people in different scenarios. So do you have like a small database to help you on certain things, or is it more inside of you when it comes to these things?
Good question. Increasingly with age, etc., and with experience, I have more of my own experiences and just a kind of body of knowledge that I've absorbed, that I can draw from, and I can sort of cross-reference and connect various sources. But I'm always gathering new information and absorbing as much as I can, even though my discernment is higher. But that actually helps. It makes the process more efficient. I can sort through a lot of things that don't resonate or at different levels and such, and just sort of extract the things that are most helpful for me, but most importantly for other people.
Yeah. Thank you again, Troy. One last question, if you don't mind. The last
Sure.
question is, what ignites you to help people?
Love.
That's it.
I can elaborate.
Okay.
I can elaborate if you like.
Please.
But
please.
It's love. It's love. To the degree that we do the work required to open our own hearts, we are connected with everyone else's heart. And I know what it's like to suffer, and I know what it's like to feel joy, and I know what it's like to feel connected to the highest heights and the lowest lows. And there just comes a point in the evolution of a soul or a person, as I see it in my experience, where there is really nothing left to do but to serve others. And I don't just mean other people, I mean everything, inanimate objects, everything. To serve as well as we can, as much as we can, in every moment that's available to us. And that's a very simple but powerful guiding principle.
Yeah. Wow, that's as simple as that. Love, I guess. So thank you again.
Back to basics.
Back to basics. It has to be back to basics. Thank you again, Troy, for coming here on my show. But before you leave, do you have any last words for my Back to Basic viewers and watchers that we have here?
Be at peace. Be at peace. There is order even in seeming disorder. The world is perfectly imperfect by design. Be at peace.
Wow. Thank you again, Troy, for coming on my show and making this brighter for me and And I really enjoyed chatting with you. I enjoyed chatting with you offline also, and it's great. So thank you again, and definitely we will stay in touch. Definitely, if I have any questions about love, business, and health, I will definitely contact you with the WWC website that you have, which is, you want to say the website before we leave today?
wisdomwarriorcoaching.com.
There you go. Thank you so much, Troy, for coming here, and God bless on whatever you're doing, and just enjoy what you're doing, and keep on igniting people, or I should say igniting yourself at the same time with all the fire that you have. So thank you again, Troy.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. So guys, we spoke with Troy today, and we talked about the basics of life. We talked about the basics of business and health, and how you should ignite yourself with passion, love, caring. That is all we're trying to say. And just be mindful. When someone needs help, there's no shame of calling someone saying, I need help. Because you know what? There are stereotyped people around the world that you go for help and people think that you're a mental patient. That's not true. Just care and make sure you get help. That's the main thing that we're trying to say here. As usual, as always, there is a quote of the day from Back to Basics, and here's the quote of the day. The quote is, the mind is not a vessel that needs filling, but wood that's need igniting. That's what we are talking about, igniting yourself with a whole bunch of care, a whole bunch of love, and that is all we care. And guys, just remember, you got to do what I should do, is we should love each other. Back to Basic needs all the love and support from all the listeners and viewers. And just remember, what do I always say at the end of the episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care, God bless. Keep on commenting, good, bad, ugly, either way. It will make my show stronger, and I will bring out 3 main things in this show. Great content, great guest, and definitely the awesomest host as ever. Guys, take care, God bless, and I will see you next week.